What would you do if you found out that you had become the heroine of a sadistic novel? A magnificently beautiful but frightened heroine came to Count Grey. The young man did not like this, as he asked not to follow him. The girl thought it was a good idea to beat the bastard up hard and stay away from him, so she punched him in the face. The guy didn't understand what it was. The heroine's arm hurt from this blow. He had quite thick skin. She asked to break off the engagement. After all, no one could hurt her. The heroine of the novel would no longer endure humiliation. Candace threw the handkerchief in his face, saying that she no longer wanted to be his bride. She showed the middle finger to the former contender for her heart with all her expression, and showered him with insults from head to toe. The heroine decided to choose the main male character herself. An hour before, characteristic sounds were heard from a gazebo nearby. The Count and the young woman were especially secluded. The girl covered her mouth with her hand, but the young man asked not to do this. The young people enjoyed each other. In 2 days, the man was supposed to get married, and he was spending all his energy on this young lady. She asked if her companion was afraid that he would not be able to satisfy the Countess on their wedding night. The guy asked to forget about that boring girl. He had no doubt in his abilities. He was irritated that his bride was so good. He felt uncomfortable mentioning her. The girl followed him everywhere like a clinging thing. The hero began to get ready. He kissed his companion on the forehead and said that they would see each other in a few days. The Count had just left the gazebo when he immediately met people he knew. It was his bride together with a certain young man. The future groom was irritated by her appearance alone. He looked menacingly and took a step towards her. The guy asked when she learned to eavesdrop. The pink-haired girl stood with her head bowed in shame. She began to justify herself by saying that she didn't do it on purpose. She just wanted to give away the baked goods that she baked herself. The Count was not going to believe it and asked not to follow him. The girl in the green dress, holding up her hem, called out to Grey. The young lady did not hesitate to bow to the Countess and began to apologize, shamelessly blaming the young man for everything. Everyone knew that the Countess loved Grey to the point of madness. No matter what he did, she continued to follow him. The groom's mistress still needed to find the Count, so she decided to leave them. She understood perfectly well that Candace was useless. She couldn't even keep a man. The girl was so shocked by such impudence that she couldn't even hold the basket of baked goods. She was very sad. She couldn't control herself. Memories of when the Count was kind to her were flickering in her head. Now she didn't like him at all, but her affection was stronger than her mind. Her servant suggested killing her fiancé. Candace was shocked. She turned to face him and asked him to repeat what he said. The young man was seriously planning to kill the Count because he made the lady sad and therefore deserved to die. The shocked heroine repeated his words in a whisper. Suddenly, she grabbed her head and screamed shrilly. The little girl was pointed at in the forehead and blamed for everything. The mother screamed that her daughter was an obstacle to their easy life. After those incidents, she realized that she needed to try harder, and she assumed that if she studied hard, she would be able to escape from that family. The man screamed furiously. He did not want to die from the disease alone. He planned to kill everyone so that he would not leave alone. He had already swung the knife at his wife, but the girl blocked it and caught the blow herself. After the impact, she fell, and barely audible sounds reached her mind, as if someone was calling for help. Candace opened her eyes after this sudden headache. She didn't understand what it was. The girl could not determine the reason why she suddenly had memories that did not belong to her. The servant began to ask about her well-being. The heroine had very little strength. She was falling to the side. The guy was holding her. These memories seemed to her like someone else's life. The servant picked her up and was about to take her to the doctor, but Candace asked not to do this. It was better for her to sit in a quiet place. The Countess could not understand what these memories had to do with her and why they appeared in her mind, but suddenly the realization came that these were memories from a past life. In that life, she lived in a bad family. Her parents wanted a boy more, but a female representative was born. She desperately wanted to get rid of the pain caused by her birth family. She died protecting her mother. Candace opened her eyes and told the servant that she was fine. After that, she went into a sadomasochistic affair. Candace was the Count's daughter and the heroine of this novel. And Earl Grey was the hero of the novel. Candace was engaged to him. He always relied on his outstanding looks and family background to meet women everywhere. Even after they got married, Grey did not change his lifestyle. The guy brought women into the house in front of the heroine, but she did not want to give up because she loved Gray since childhood. She believed that if she worked hard on herself, she would be able to change the cheater. The two tormented each other for a long time until Candace lost the child and completely abandoned the Count. The main character suddenly wakes up and runs after his wife to the crematorium. Finally, the heroine made his heart tremble. Mutual feelings finally appeared between them. They both reached the final. In short, it is a novel about a scumbag and a prodigal son who returns home, and the heroine abuses her body and heart. The girl smiled when asked about her health. She wondered about her character and whether it was written in the original novel. She picked up a servant a few years ago. He passed the exam and became her personal bodyguard. The faithful defender was magnificently handsome. The heroine couldn't understand why the main character was such a rotten vegetable until then. She had to have a sadomasochistic relationship with such an idiot. She stood up and confidently decided that she had to change the plot. 6 months ago, she lost her parents who loved her, and then, according to the plot, the lonely sister married the Schubert son. Candace suggested to the servant to go and clean up the trash. She had such a hard time in her past life, and now she lived like a rich lady. She planned to get rid of the scumbag who was ruining her life. Now that she was rich and beautiful, she could enjoy life to the fullest. The Count asked the girl again after her unexpected slap. Candace realized that she needed to run away. The guy grabbed her hand, turned her around sharply, and loudly asked if she wanted to break off the engagement. The girl ordered to let go of the hand. Somewhere inside, she was worried that the groom would want to fight with her. But Gray squeezed his hand even harder and told him to answer the question. The girl called her servant. The servant grabbed the Count by the hand and turned to him. Gray did not take his eyes off the bride. Candace and her ward asked him to let go of the girl's hand. The Count told the servant to get out of the way because he should not interfere in the affairs of the masters, but he apologized and said that he served only his lady. Candace asked the servant again to remove the Count's hand and not let him touch her because for her it was like dirt. The ward accepted the assignment. He squeezed Gray's hand so hard that he finally let go of the lady and began to demand that she let him go. Before letting the Count go, the servant asked the girl for permission and received it. Gray asked the bride what she was doing. He didn't understand how Candace could do this to him, whether she really wanted to break off the engagement. Of course, she sincerely wanted to break it off, and she wouldn't lie in front of so many people. The Count agreed and wished not to regret this decision. She didn't have the strength to keep her mouth shut. She didn't understand why she should regret this breakup. The mistress grabbed Gray by the sleeve and reminded everyone of Candace's fiery nature, asking the gentleman not to worry. He shook himself and said that it irritated him when girls behaved like that. The lady called him a bastard, did not understand how she could trust him, and sincerely hoped that he would not bother her in the future. The mistress was waiting for this break, because after it, the Count would become hers. The girl sat down on the bed. She was very tired. She needed a good rest. A lot had fallen on her. According to the plot, she would have had a miscarriage. She was sorry that she lost the memory of her previous life. Otherwise, she could have changed the plot and saved her parents. For 17 years now, she has been living a very happy life surrounded by people who love her very much. Her only misfortune was her vile fiancé. Due to the memory loss of her past life, she was always influenced by the plot before and was completely devoted to this scumbag. But this life is now in the past. From this day on, she becomes free. She really wanted to sleep, but unexpected guests came to visit her. Candace realized that people were very aware of the situation that had happened. They quickly came to her. She asked the guests why they came to see her. The young men heard that the lady was breaking off her engagement to Earl Grey. The girl confirmed, but noted that these were their personal problems. She really wanted to sleep. They were interested in what the young lady was going to do after the breakup. She put a cup of coffee on the table and said with a serious face that she wanted to become a countess. The young people assumed that she would need connections with reliable people previously. The Count had protected her, but now that the engagement was broken, no one was stopping them from getting her. Everyone began to sing her praises about her sincere, long-lasting love and asked her to take a closer look at her son. It was funny, she only broke off one engagement and then got so much attention. She thanked those who came but was going to continue using her father's old people. The men frowned. One of them countered by saying that she was too young, did not know how to manage the Count's palace, and by law the condition for a woman to inherit the title was marriage, and she had broken off the engagement. Candace asked not to worry about her. According to the law, the property of the mansion had nothing to do with them. The man asked her to be more reasonable so that, in his opinion, they could live in peace. The girl said that she would not let them touch her parents' inheritance, and if they put pressure on her, they won't get anything at all. After this, she asked the servant to take the night guests away. The outraged men began to leave. Candace was going to protect the family that her parents had protected their entire lives. She wouldn't give that up to anyone. But the guests were right that if she wanted to inherit the title of Count, she should get married and began to think about her future husband. She looked up at the servant, noting his handsome face. He could potentially become her husband. The young man seemed to her handsome, strong, capable of protecting her. Moreover, he was an orphan, so it would be possible to enter into marriage without any problems. To sum it up, the servant was the only candidate for husband at that time who met her requirements. But there was one moment when Candace asked him to undress. The servant began to do this without further ado. The girl liked his hands. They seemed neat to her, with clearly defined joints. He unbuttoned his shirt with ease. At one point he stopped, assuming that the lady was falling into despair because of the break in the engagement, but the servant was still burning with the desire to kill the Count. Candace told him to keep going. He was being very good. A moment later he was standing shirtless. Suddenly, blood started flowing from her nose. It was not clear why. Candace was very embarrassed and needed to stop the nosebleed as soon as possible. The servant was afraid for his mistress and leaned towards her. She didn't want him to come any closer. She was afraid of losing all her blood. He asked for a handkerchief and decided to wipe away the blood himself. With very careful movements, he collected the blood from the lower part of the girl's face. She considered the servant to be very handsome and gentle. In short, an ideal candidate for a husband. Candace never fell in love in her past life, but in this one she met a scumbag Count. After looking over the young man's body, she ordered him to get dressed. The girl continued to examine his perfect muscle contours. After that, she asked the servant to sit on the sofa opposite. The young man reminded that it was against the rules, but the lady insisted she needed to have a serious talk with him. He sat down opposite after all. Putting her hand on her chest, the lady said that she wanted to marry him. The guy was taken aback. The girl repeated what she had said once more. The servant thought that they were making fun of him because the mistress was always playful. Candace waited for some kind of reaction from him, but in the end she heard wishes of happiness. It was an incomprehensible answer, neither yes nor no, but the servant's expression was quite serious. She realized that the guy thought she was joking. He was too well-mannered and serious a guy. She needed to say otherwise for him to understand her. In fact, she needed a partner to inherit the title, but if she chose someone else, he would probably covet her property. The servant stood up and bowed, thanking her for sharing her experiences. The young man was ready to do anything to make his mistress happy. He placed her hand on his chest and asked her if she liked it. The guy asked not to worry, that he would do everything as needed. Candace opened her eyes and rubbed her temple. It was an indecent dream. She knew she shouldn't have looked at it before going to bed. She got too carried away. A maid entered the room and announced that the Count had arrived. It was unexpected. She remembered that he had never come to her after that incident in his mansion. She said that Gray would wait. She was interested in what this meeting would lead to. It was sunny outside. Gray asked why he waited so long, because before, when he came to her, she would fly to him like a bullet, but now she made him wait. The Count asked if the lady had been informed that he had arrived and why she had not yet come. The maid told the boy that he could go back as the mistress was still not awake. She would let her know when she woke up. Gray said he would wait a little longer. Time went on and on. Candace tested his patience. Obviously, she had not met him on purpose. The Count was going to humiliate himself before her and ask her to make peace, but if she did not want to, so be it in the future, in his opinion. It was not worth expecting that he would take the initiative. The door opened. Gray, thinking that it was his ex-fiancé, began to make claims without even turning around. But it was the maid. She conveyed that the mistress did not wish to see him today. He was asked to leave. The young man asked the maid again, and then began to smile sarcastically. Since she did not want to see him, he asked her to remember his words. The Count decided to leave her for a while so that the girl could think about her behavior. The lady even asked again if he had really said it, what expression he had on his face at that moment. The maid replied that it was very ugly, gloomy, and scary. He became very angry after 3 hours of waiting. The girl reminded him that she once waited for him for hours. Although all these were plot events, it was as if she lived them for real. He was very kind to me when the girl was very young, but then he changed his attitude. The maid asked if she needed to contact the count, because it seemed that the lady was upset. But in fact, she was sad about the time she had wasted. Her feelings seemed to have been trampled and fed to a pack of dogs. Her wonderful life has just begun. The girl asked the servant if she was right. He immediately answered positively. She was very pleased to look at him. Candace asked to inform the treasurer that she wanted to see reports of all assets registered in her name. The lady wanted to enjoy a quiet life. The woman told the lady that there were some important documents in the financial room and that it was not advisable for her bodyguard to enter there, but the girl said that it was now her husband. The woman led them inside and asked them to wait. The treasurer was supposed to arrive a little later. Candace visited the finance department for the first time. Her parents took care of everything, so she never had to do anything like that. They wanted her to grow up healthy and happy. The young man in glasses provided information on all the properties in the mansion and operational reports. The treasurer was the novel's faithful second protagonist. The industry of the Count's palace includes transportation, mining, processing, and production of minerals. In the novel, the treasurer silently guarded the heroine until the end of the novel. He helped her guard her property. In fact, she was thinking about making him her husband. Because he would never betray Candace, but compared to him, Sunny had more advantages. She decided to live this life for pleasure, which means she needs a handsome man. So Lauren will just help her and also deal with professional issues. Candace asked how much money she currently had at her disposal and how rich she was among the families in the city. It turned out that the girl was the richest. The lady, of course, knew that her family was very rich, but she did not know that it was that rich. But now she will spend them to make herself happy. The girl gave Lauren instructions that he would continue to manage her property. He bowed to her and thanked her for her trust. It felt like the lady had matured overnight. Lauren decided to clarify whether she really decided to marry her security guard. She explained that she needed to preserve the right to the family inheritance. She needed a husband for this. Sunny was the most suitable option. She thought for a long time and chose him. Lauren advised me to think it over carefully and not worry about the rest. They decided to end it there so as not to distract the treasurer from his work. Everything became clear with the assets. The next step was to inherit the title as soon as possible. Candace invited Sunny to go with her and buy him some new clothes, since her fiancé was not supposed to wear a guard's outfit. The guy still couldn't believe that she decided to marry her. Candace began to worry that he wanted the same thing. It wasn't that the guy was just a bodyguard, that is, a commoner. The lady had to find someone worthy of her, otherwise it could have a bad effect on her reputation. In her past life, she was a poor girl of ordinary origin. But the lady didn't care about her pedigree. She needed someone she could trust, especially since the guy was very handsome. The only guy worthy of her was her scumbag ex-fiancé. All the others were no good. Besides, when the lady saved him, he lost his memory due to injuries. He forgot who he was. She suggested that he might be a lost prince from another country, but he flatly rejected these guesses. It infuriated her when handsome men had such low self-esteem. She lifted his face with her finger and asked him not to belittle himself anymore. After all, now he will be her husband, which means he will represent the lady. If he continues to neglect himself, it will damage her reputation. The young man was shocked and said he would never do it again. She emphasized that he called her Milady when he should have called her Candace. Sunny listened to her attentively and completely agreed. There was no need for more formalities. He was no longer a servant. The distance between them was becoming smaller and smaller. They arrived, and as they were getting out of the carriage, the guy, without further ado, offered her his hand. The lady thanked her beloved. She took his hand and they moved on. Candace saw the guy's reaction to this and asked what was going on. Almost stuttering, he replied that everything was fine. Sunny reacted so sweetly when such a handsome man played innocent, it pleased the lady. The lady and her newly made groom entered the estate. 2 rows of maids were waiting for them, their heads bowed. The noble person greeted Candace and they were glad to see her. The lady said that they had come to pick out clothes for her fiancé. The lady realized that the rumors were true, and the countess called off her engagement to Gray. The lady found the cookies on the plate cute, so she decided to try them. They were presented with the latest collection and asked to take a look at it. Candace asked the groom to go and look at an outfit for himself. The girl volunteered to help him with the choice. Sunny didn't mind. Of course, some options were completely useless, and a painstaking selection of images lay ahead. In any case, the young man had a good figure. He was handsome. No matter what they put on him, Sunny would look great. The guy himself noted that Milady became much more cheerful. Gray still couldn't calm down and warned that he wouldn't run after his ex-fiancé. Candace didn't know how many times she had to repeat that she had broken off the engagement and that there was nothing else between them. Their paths diverged. She sincerely hoped that the Count would not bother her anymore. It was difficult to talk to such an egocentric person. Gray grabbed the lady by the hand and began to turn her towards him. Asked if she had heard him, the lady asked him to let her go. A few moments later, Sunny intervened and aggressively hinted that his bride should not be touched. Gray was hurt by this. His ex-fiancé asked him to be careful. The Count asked how a commoner dared to raise his hand against him. Sunny was the future owner of the Count's house. His status was no worse than Gray's. The lady made it clear that she no longer wanted to hear such words addressed to her fiancé. She had long convinced him not to worry about his origins, and this bastard dared to say such a thing. They were supposed to get engaged soon. Candace wished the former scumbag and his lover to also legitimize their relationship. There weren't many normal protagonists in sadistic stories. That's terrible. The lady was beside herself with anger. She could not believe that Gray dared to say such a thing. Previously, the bastard didn't respect her at all, but now he kept trying to hurt her. If he behaved like that again, he should be given a good beating. Sunny listened silently to the instructions and agreed. Candace asked him if he really agreed with all her sayings, asked what if she wanted to sell it. Sunny said that he belongs to her completely. Even if she wants to sell him, he will not be outraged. But the lady would never do that. He was her fiancé. It was unclear how he could meekly wait for her to sell him. He had to resist. He had the right to refuse. And if the lady really sells it, he will have to go back himself, so she can sell it again and make a lot of money. Sunny smiled sweetly and said that he understood everything. The guy was so handsome. The thought of them sleeping together made the lady drool. The young man asked if she hadn't been the one talking about a sham marriage. Candace apologized and said that she wanted to marry him for real. The girl confessed her feelings to him. She fell in love with his appearance, and worries settled in her head that it was too superficial. She didn't have to worry about buying food, clothes, and she had an incredibly handsome husband. This is not life, but a fairy tale. Sunny thought that the girl was truly disappointed in the Count. The lady gave orders to Lauren to find a reliable elder from her clan and ask him to come. Then a marriage contract had to be prepared. It was necessary to conclude a marriage with Sunny with the witness of the elder of their clan. The treasurer listened to everything and bowed to her. In order not to waste time, she needed to marry Sunny as soon as possible. Then she would inherit the title. The lady was asked if she was sure that she wanted to marry that particular young man. The answer was positive. She thought it over and asked to help them and be a witness to the marriage. The man understood them. They needed to sign the marriage application that lay in front of them. The young people began to sign without any delay. Suddenly, a voice out of nowhere began to say that the heroine of a sadistic novel was entering into a relationship with the protagonist of a novel about forced love. Sunny noticed that the girl was worried and asked what happened to her. The girl realized that only she heard this voice. It was worth remembering that she was the heroine of a sadistic novel. It turns out that the main character of the novel about forced love was Sunny. Milady apologized for disturbing the man at such an hour, but all was well. Candace didn't understand how her former servant could end up being the main character. After all, if he was the main character, then she went from one trouble to another. Sunny saw that the girl was worried about something and asked what happened. She was furious with her situation. She had just recently gotten rid of the nasty main character, and then the main character from another novel about coercion appeared again. Her coldness made Sunny think that his wife was regretting her decision. There was a new work by the same author, for which only an annotation was written. It was a novel about the forced love of a prince and princess. The main character of the novel is now Sonny, also known as Antoine de Aubry-Paricio. He was an illegitimate son whom the king conceived with a commoner during his educational travels in his youth. His mother raised him alone. One night, when Sonny was 7 years old, a group of mysterious killers appeared. His mother was brutally murdered, and since then he lived on the streets. He was treated like a slave, beaten, bought, and sold. After overcoming all the difficulties to become the best assassin, he was recognized as king at the age of 23. The beautiful Duchess Sally Lester was extremely attractive to Sano, who worked in the shadows. He was drawn to her. He was even ready to drag her to prison to be with her. Candace knew that the character she had accidentally found in the novel could not have been so handsome. It turned out that he was the main character of another novel. It's unclear why he ended up in a novel about forced love. The lady had both her hands cuffed. Sano had a whip in his hands. Already in reality, she grabbed her head with both hands. She hated forced love in novels. The guy couldn't understand why his wife continued to behave this way. He thought that it was his fault. Sano tried to touch her, but she immediately pulled away. The girl didn't understand what to do, because he could suddenly start strangling her. Usually all the heroes of novels about forced love did this. The young man realized that Candace was avoiding him. He asked Milady not to be sad if she regretted her choice, then they could immediately go to the clan elders so that they could help them cancel the marriage. Candace didn't expect to hear that. The girl immediately threw herself into his arms. The lady didn't understand how she could forget that Sano was a gentle and considerate guy, and not some kind of prison pervert. The lady did not regret her choice. She said that she was just thinking about something sad. That's why she lost her mood. She believed that her new husband would not harm her. Sano asked if he could help. There are still a few years before the plot begins. If Candace senses something is wrong, she will simply leave. The lady wanted the guy to be happy. She really liked him, secretly hoping that she could fix him so that he wouldn't become a dark pervert. The anxiety disappeared from Sano's face. Once again, she began to admire his beauty. It is not surprising that he became the main character of a novel about forced love. Suddenly, Candace pushed her husband. From this new angle, according to the lady, his face looked even better. The lady leaned closer to him. The girl was nervous. That day was their first wedding night. 2 worlds merged into one. Candace unbuttoned her shirt. Yesterday you could only look, but not touch. Now finally there was an opportunity to feel it for real. But the young man grabbed her hand and said that this was not right. But the lady did not understand what his words meant because they were officially married. In Candace's opinion, he couldn't resist his wife. If he tried to stop her again, he would be punished. The guy tried to counter by saying that she was his mistress. The girl did not accept any refusals and began to unbutton even more. Candace was pleased with everything that was happening around her. The young man wondered how he could possibly desecrate the one he considered his goddess. Until the age of 7, he remembered nothing except that he always felt that no one needed him. In order not to die of hunger, Sano begged for alms. Sometimes he had to fight for food, even with stray dogs. His weak body, driven by hunger, pushed him to steal whenever tempting food appeared before his eyes. One day, he was noticed by human traffickers, perhaps attracted by his appearance. He was kidnapped and sold to an aristocrat with a bad reputation. In a desperate attempt to escape, he inflicted a wound on the aristocrat and, without looking back, began to run. As soon as Sano was on the street, he was caught again by the aristocrat's men. The enraged aristocrat intended to beat the boy to death. Just when the boy's heart had resigned itself to the inevitable end, a shining figure entered his life, his goddess. Candace paid the aristocrat from her own funds and bought the boy. Tears of gratitude choked him as he vowed to keep her forever and protect her life at the cost of his own. The girl was amazed that even his pectoral muscles remained soft. The breakup of her engagement with Gray was a turning point since then. Candace seemed to be reborn, and it was this new thing in her that promised changes that no one could have predicted. The lady ran after him, each time receiving only pain in response, and became sadder and sadder, but now the girl became carefree and happy. Sano noticed that she was drooling and began to wipe it away. He shared that he was glad to see the lady like this again. At first, the girl did not understand how exactly. The guy explained that she became cheerful, happy, and carefree, not the one who sheds tears because of the count. Candace calmed him down, saying that she wouldn't cry anymore because she had a good husband by her side and no one would need that scoundrel now. The guy had an 8-pack. The young man interrupted his wife again. She did not understand what else was needed from her and did not have time to enjoy his body. Now they were officially married. The girl could touch him, especially since it was their first night. She wanted to feel every inch of his body. Sano reminded that the lady wanted to take care of the title succession matters first. If something happened, they would not be able to leave for the capital tomorrow. Candace frowned, almost forgetting about her business. The girl stood up and said that she would forgive him this time. The young man stood up and began to style the girl's hair. But the newlywed wife warned that the guy would still stay with her that night. Candace had no plans to let him go anywhere. She definitely wanted to make him hers. That night they slept together, and Sano was glad that dawn had come. He was confused by the fact that the lady did not see him as a threat at all, did not keep her distance at all, and he assumed that she did not see him as a man. The young man didn't like this. If you give free rein to your desires, you won't be able to stop them. After some time, the inheritance documents were already in Candace's hands. Now I could breathe freely. The girl asked her husband to call her Countess. Sano knelt down, placed his hand on her chest, and swore that he would protect her until his last breath. The Countess asked the maid to put the documents in a safe place. Candace imagined how she would return home and immediately show them to all her distant relatives. She wanted to see who else would dare to lay claim to her fortune. Anyone who encroached on her wealth must die. Sano took it too literally and asked if she really wanted them to die. He could get rid of them quietly and without a trace. But the girl stopped him, saying that it hadn't come to that yet. And she noted that her husband should not agree with everything she tells him. Otherwise, he will spoil her completely if a girl is wrong. There is no need to indulge her. But Sano didn't understand how his wife could be wrong. But seeing the lady's reaction, he still agreed. Since they had come to the capital, this meant to the lady that the couple needed to have a lot of fun before returning home. The maid ran after them and asked them to wait. But Candace said that there was no need to follow them. The young people had a date planned and suggested that she take 2 guards and go for a walk. The capital glittered with wealth and one's eyes ran wild. Although the count had money, the city was nowhere near comparable to that expensive capital. Candace thought about actually living there. The girl asked her husband's opinion. Suddenly a cry was heard. Sano pulled her towards him. Some ladies came. One of the girls called Candace a country bumpkin. She drew the Countess's attention to how quickly she had changed into her dress for the Count's reception. But the lady didn't care about it. She considered that person crazy. The upstart didn't like that the heroine was ignoring her and began shouting at her back, demanding that she stop. Seeing no response, she ran after Candace. The unpleasant person started calling security and demanded that they immediately stop the main character. 2 guards stepped forward and blocked their path like a wall, not allowing them to go any further. Sano irritably ordered the guards to get out of the way. An annoying upstart began to approach the couple. She demanded that Candace apologize to her. Only on this condition would she let them go. This was some kind of nonsense, because she was the one who insulted them first, and now she was demanding something. The servant of this nasty lady began to shout out her origins, that she had to be obeyed if you wanted to live in the capital. Candace waited for the law to be quoted that allowed this girl to command others. The lady called this place a capital swamp, said that she wanted to return to her native place and manage the farm, and was dissatisfied with the service. The manager ordered the couple to be evicted, but the servant reminded them that they had rented the entire top floor for 5 days, and if they did so, the hotel would suffer great losses. Candace asked what good it was that she was the daughter of big parents. What did she want to achieve by this? Was the upstart really just another villain from the novel who came to torment the main character? This person was very proud of her origin. Her name was Celine. She was not surprised that the lady did not know her name. She ordered to bow down. Candace remembered that her maid had the same name. There were no other characters with that name in the novel. The girl was furious. She didn't understand how they dared to call her a servant, but the heroine only told the truth. She was the first to be oppressed, even though she had done nothing. Celine countered by saying that her opponent was from a small count's house. She couldn't do anything to her. She couldn't watch her tongue. It was no wonder the count had abandoned her. Candace realized what was going on. That annoying bastard had left his mark here too, and the lady couldn't understand why she couldn't get rid of those stupid plot lines. She couldn't even believe that the bastard had found himself a mistress in the capital, and she also didn't like that her count's house was called small. Her family brought in enough taxes in a year to support the entire capital. Milady did not want to talk to them. They were wasting her time. She ordered the servants to get out of the way. Celine was also part of Gray's love affairs. She didn't want to have anything to do with it at all. She didn't want to get involved in that stupid romantic plot. The unpleasant madam continued to shout something at their backs and again ordered the servants to immediately stop the newlyweds. The head of security gave orders to his subordinates. One of them made a clumsy gesture towards the lady with a spear. Sano immediately stood up for his wife. The new clothes they bought together got torn. But the girl didn't care about the clothes. The main thing was that her husband remained safe. If he got hurt, she wouldn't be able to bear it. Besides, now this magnificent torso and waist were in full view of everyone. Sano was furious that they dared point weapons at his mistress. The guards did not understand where the wind came from. Candace realized that it was her husband's magic, but the world of her romance was not about magic. But suddenly I remembered that the description of the novel contained elements of fantasy. A loud and decisive female voice rang out in the silence, ordering an immediate end to what was happening. Candace didn't realize who it was, so she turned around to look. It turned out that it was the daughter of the Duke of Cleister, and they did not expect to see her there. Celine began to complain to Sully, who had arrived, that the main character had slandered her. It turned out she was a character in another stupid book. The question arose whether Sanno would be able to go against the canon of the novel, or whether he would still fall in love with Sully. Candace was his main character. She didn't like that he even looked at her. The girl began to talk to Celine, that in fact the girl was not evil, did not understand why she humiliated someone, but the nasty lady continued to brazenly lie. The main character realized that the two were familiar. It was because of the unification of two worlds. For a capital aristocrat to humiliate a lady from a provincial earl's family was simply a disgrace Candace should have been apologized to. The lady refused to apologize, knowing that even after them they would despise them, noted that she was not a count's daughter. She herself thought that her city was better. Celine began to mock that her opponent had lost her status as a count's daughter, and suggested that she had been kicked out after the engagement was broken. But the lady explained that she was not just a count's daughter, but already a full-fledged countess. She had already received the documents of inheritance and was now the mistress of the count's house. Candace asked if Celine still insisted on an apology. The unpleasant person could not believe that the countess was in front of her. Sully understood everything and demanded that the girl apologize to the countess. After some denials, she finally deigned to apologize for her insolence. Both Candace and Sully were heroines of a novel about forced love, and they understood each other. The girl asked Celine to leave there. She was ready to bear responsibility on behalf of the ducal house. Candace did not refuse compensation, demanding compensation for moral damages, the attack on Sano, and for the tiresome dispute. Her servant had to contact her to discuss the details. Sully herself also apologized. Celine's mother was her aunt. She was going to ask to raise her daughter better. Having to clean up messes because of a relative was very tiring. To inherit the title, an approved marriage was required. If Celine said that the girl lost her fiancé, the question arose as to how Candace did it. But everything was simple. She found a new one. Sano was her ideal husband, tall and handsome. She had to choose her husband herself. There was little use in a spineless and irresponsible reveler. If you think about it, the man who was always there belonged to you completely, was handsome, faithful, with a narrow waist, long legs, and 8-pack abs. Sully thought that what was said actually made sense, and she agreed that it was a very sensible decision. Candace realized that perhaps this made her the villain who was fighting the main character for a man. This novel only had a brief synopsis. If we do not take into account the crazy love of the main character, then the novel itself has a classic plot about salvation having caught a ray of light. He was healed, so now he did not want to let it go. If that was the case, then Candace now looked like a real villain who was trying to ruin other people's relationships. Although on the outside everything looked quite normal, it was worth remembering that two novels had merged into one world. But not a single event from the novel has happened yet. There were no key events, which means the future will also be different. She needed to relax and stop acting suspicious. Suli asked the young man what he was doing there. He replied that he saw Celine and asked what happened this time. This man did not look like a random passerby. He was told that the girl was there, asked if everything was okay. Suli asked not to worry, everything was fine with her. In that case, he asked permission to accompany her when she was free. She would have to go to the estate to listen to all of Celine's excuses. Suli decided to introduce the newlyweds to the guy. This young man's name was Alan. He grew up with his companion. He seemed to be very friendly despite his noble origins. Suli didn't want to stop them from enjoying their walk. The most famous street of the capital was not far from the hotel. The local cranberry dessert was incredibly delicious. Candace said that the little things didn't spoil her mood, invited her to her city. The lady agreed without delay. It seemed like Suli was a very good person. As expected, the main characters could only be girls like her. The girl immediately realized that they were too close because they grew up together, because she also knew Gray from childhood. Sana was worried and began to ask what happened, but she simply remembered one unpleasant creature. Candace suggested continuing the date, but first buying her husband some new clothes. The guy was a good man, and it was him she should take care of. Sano was embarrassed by the fact that his wife was always thinking about something. It seemed to him that she was hiding something. He wanted to know everything about her. Celine began to justify herself by saying that she did this because of a certain Lena. Lena was her friend and asked her to humiliate the lady by mentioning the Count's name so that she would be overcome with a feeling of shame and anger when she remembered him. But such an act could affect Celine's reputation, especially since the Countess has a new fiancé. It is unclear why this friend would bother her. This indicated that Gray is incredibly charming. Alan supposed that it was his frivolity towards women that made him so perfect. In the Empire, such behavior was not encouraged. Gentlemen should not use women to demonstrate their attractiveness. It was right to remain faithful only to the one you truly love. Celine made a comparison with him, because since childhood he had only held Suli's hand, although the girl also knew him, even as a child, but he ignored her. The boy responded by saying that she was her cousin, so he considered her his younger sister, but the blue-haired girl interrupted them. Suli stared out the window and began to think about the man she saw, wondering who he was. At that moment, a strong wind blew. Everyone noticed it. It clearly came from Sano. It was clear that it was magic, but how could such a thing be possible? Candace was already going to bed, but she couldn't sleep. In her opinion, there was something wrong with Duke Alan. Sano came out of the bath, rubbing his head with a towel. It turns out that the lady fell asleep yesterday without even having dinner. He asked if he should bring her dinner. He had such a striking appearance, noble origin, gentle and generous character. He was Suli's childhood friend, and she was very dear to him. He had all the outstanding qualities. It seems the girl understood. Since he was from a novel about forced love, it meant that his role was the main character's true love. They grew up together. Suddenly, the main character appears, takes his beloved, and out of envy arranges a real persecution for him. They are the perfect couple. It is already clear from their behavior that they have mutual feelings, but the crazy main character will separate them. They have already met the one who should torment them. And this culprit stood in front of her and offered her food. She didn't want him to look at her with puppy eyes. Sano was wearing the new pajamas she had bought, with the top open. The girl was even a little irritated that her husband was so handsome and sweet. She firmly decided for herself that if such a handsome man became hers, then she would agree to forced love, even if she had to force it. Candace was planning to return to her hometown tomorrow and get married right away. She couldn't wait any longer. Looking at something she couldn't touch was torture for her. Two sentimental people grew up together and feelings gradually developed between them. The girl was already their fan, this time without the main character's intervention. Suli was definitely going to choose according to her heart and find happiness. Her task was to not let Sano get close to her. Then everyone would have a wonderful future. They could finally get married. And when the time comes, her dear husband will find himself in her arms. The guy said that if they were already married, then it was his turn to take the initiative. He decided to switch places with his wife so that it would be more convenient for both of them to continue what they were doing. He also said that she was now completely his. Suddenly, Candace woke up and realized it was just a dream. There was a gentle and kind husband nearby. It is impossible for him to follow the original path. It is the girl who should dominate him. She made it clear and unambiguous that in all such situations she would be the one to take the initiative and take control. Sano did not understand what this was about. Did his wife really notice something? The lady did not understand why the carriage stopped because it was still far to the city. The maid reported that a man had arrived from the estate with a carriage and said that he had a gift for her. The estate manager was sent by Suli. She learned that the lady was leaving the capital early in the morning, so she ordered him to catch up and give the gift. They had prepared for her the fabrics for which the estate was famous, and an iron sword that the blacksmiths had recently forged, and their knights would ensure their safe passage to the city. Candace remembered the promised compensation. She thought she would receive nothing because of her imminent departure. It seemed the lady kept her promises. The Countess asked that the gifts be transferred to her carriage, and then to have dinner and only after that continue on their way. The mountain breeze was so refreshing. The girl felt rested. The wind was wonderful. Remembering those events, the Countess asked what kind of wind was in front of the guards then. The unusual power left Sano. One quickly disappeared. He never said that he had such powers. There was magic in the novel, but the husband had never used it before. The young man grabbed her hands and said that he himself did not know where he got such abilities from, especially since he would never hide it. Candace knew that he would not hide anything from her. She liked his honesty the most. That is why they became spouses. The guy understood this long ago. The girl chose him because of his devotion and obedience. She wondered if he would be able to use magic again. If it really was magic, then it was simply incredible. Sano didn't even know he had such power, but now he seems to be starting to feel it. Just a moment later, they felt an invisible force swirl around them, filling the air with tension. This meant that magic really did exist in that world. Candace was glad that her husband could use magic. After so many years, her ordinary life finally turned into a fairy tale. The Countess asked not to use magic without need. She did not yet know exactly how that world was arranged. It is unclear why magic appeared after the merging of worlds. Many may have noticed his abilities, but no one guessed that he was an illegitimate prince. Even if the capital's authorities found out about him, the lady was going to protect him. She didn't know where else to find such a handsome and devoted husband who would allow her to do whatever she wanted with herself. There was a cozy atmosphere around. Candace suggested taking their relationship to a more intimate level. But Sano refused, saying that they would soon have dinner. The girl agreed to postpone it until their wedding night. 3,000 gold coins, 5,000 silver, 50 strings of pearls from the fresh waters of the capital, 100 lambs, 30 boxes of colored lace from Atalaya, and 3 more iron swords of good quality. All these gifts are registered in Candace's name, and the lambs can be raised on the estate. The wedding was about to take place, so this could be considered a wedding gift from Suli, especially since the guy seemed to like sharp weapons. The lady was wondering if it was possible to forge a good sword somewhere in this novel. So far, only cold weapons exist. Even a quality sword is hard to find, let alone a unique one. If she wanted to buy a sword, she could try her luck at the auction next month, where they said the weapons of great swordsmen would be on display. The treasurer, with all due respect, reminded her how much money the lady had spent on Gray, and was now again going to spend a fortune on a man. Candace suddenly perked up and looked as if she had just woken up from a deep sleep. Lauren reminded him that she had emptied her personal reserves for a man, and now she wanted to do the same. He didn't want to look at it again. The girl didn't even know that she had spent so much on him because she was born into a very rich family and she didn't have to worry about money. In the past, under the influence of feelings, she really spent a lot on him. Candace couldn't believe she was so obsessed. She wanted to know how much she had spent on him in total. If she had spent her personal savings on him, then it was a complete disgrace. The treasurer kept a close eye on her expenses and carefully recorded each of her expenditures in a special list. From the moment she first opened a personal account at the age of 10, her entire financial life was under strict control. First of all, she bought a huge cake for the Count, paid for the banquet in honor of his birthday in full, and invited a famous theater troupe from the capital. Candace spent a lot of money on this scoundrel. It was a real dark spot on the reputation of her family. At the age of 15, she gave the Count a vineyard. Lauren had been keeping track of her expenses since she was 10. He didn't even miss the cost of a single cake, although he was younger than her, a natural financier. He even converted the final amount into a universal currency and presented the result. The lady decided to take a look, was stunned by the amount, almost fainted, and demanded that it be destroyed. The treasurer could demand the return of the cash meetings. He wanted to return them so that the report would become more presentable. But the count didn't even have that kind of money, and if she demanded money after the breakup, it would become a source of gossip among the nobles. Still, this amount was a pittance compared to what she had now. Breaking off the engagement did not mean that the money spent could be returned, since it was spent voluntarily. Lauren asked if the lady had planned to allocate such a large budget for the wedding. Participation in the auction would also require a lot of money. Sano asked not to spend so much money on him. He didn't even need a sword. The very fact that he would marry such a woman was the limit of his dreams. He didn't want her to bear such expenses. But in Candace's opinion, the whole problem was Gray. This bastard did not deserve her attention. The girl firmly decided that her wedding would be luxurious and loud so that everyone would know that she had broken up with the Count forever. 30 yards of moon silk had already been delivered, and the maid asked if the pearls for the dresses were ready. It turned out to be not enough, but she had already sent people for it. If there was not enough gold, then she would need to contact the manager. This should be the main event of recent years for the entire city. The lady smiled again, which meant they had to organize the wedding properly. This was the first wedding among the aristocrats on such a grand scale. A breathless guy ran in and said that there was a problem with the location of the wedding ceremony. The late Earl gave the lady the estate of Andre. When they went there, they came across the Earl's men. They stated that they first needed to get Gray's approval to use the estate for their own purposes. The maid was shocked. Perhaps the lady forgot that she had given him the estate. Candace appeared, remembering that she hadn't transmitted anything. The estate was a gift from her grandfather. It had belonged to her since childhood. She would not give it to anyone, even if she lost her mind. She didn't like that she only found out about this now. It was unclear, since when he had been in charge there. She decided to go and ask Gray personally who he thought he was. The estate had its annual wine day. They hadn't seen the Count for a long time. That day was the annual wine day, so all the respected nobles gathered there. The servant reminded him that the girl actually didn't want to have anything to do with him anymore, but she didn't care and couldn't stand such impudence. The lady ordered to take people with her and restore order in the estate. If the Count's people tried to interfere, then they could be tied up. The maid reminded him that Gray was still there, and she was confused by this approach. But the other maid reacted sharply to this because the estate originally belonged to Candace. She no longer had any doubts that the lady was doing this out of spite because she had a new lover, but they had not even gotten married. Moreover, everyone saw her persistence towards Count Gray, and in her opinion, she did not have strong feelings for her new fiancé. The Count thought that he had not seen his ex-bride for a long time. He was interested in what was happening to her. He was still waiting for her to come and apologize, but he would not forgive her so easily. The former lover appeared nearby. She hugged him by the hand and said that she had looked at everything there. The lake behind the estate connected mountain springs. The landscape was beautiful, and the interior of the estate was very luxurious. Several decades ago, when the king came on a visit, he stayed here. The girl asked to have their wedding there so that even more people would admire that place. Gray didn't understand what kind of wedding they were talking about. The girl reminded him that he had promised her, but the guy didn't remember it at all. Promises in bed didn't count for him. The Count asked to stop talking nonsense because the estate belonged to Candace. Here, the surprised voice of the ex-bride was heard, who realized that the bastard remembered whose estate it was. The girl did not understand why the Countess had come. She thought that she and Gray had finally parted ways. The bastard was glad that she couldn't resist and came to him. Gray began to say that he was unlikely to look at his bride again after his adventures. Candace asked to stop this circus. It seemed like the girl wasn't speaking a foreign language, but he couldn't understand that she found him disgusting. If her words were unintelligible, she hoped he could read. This was the very document that detailed all the rights to the estate. The Countess asked to open her eyes wider and see who owned that place. This was her estate. He did not dare use it for celebrations without her permission. People around began to whisper. The Count tried to aggressively justify himself, but he put his hands on Candace, which Sano did not like. She wanted to prove that the estate belonged to her, but Gray countered that she herself had allowed it to be used, and the managers had decided that it was his. But the genius forgot that he was no longer the son-in-law of their family. Now it was believed that he had rented this estate for the holiday. It was necessary to contact the girl's financiers. But despite the incident, it was still a holiday. The lady hoped that everyone would have a good time at her estate, and besides, she had an announcement to make. Everyone present suddenly stopped and froze, as if something unexpected had caught their attention. Gray thought that the girl made such a noise to ask for forgiveness from him. The Count said that there was no need to do anything if he wanted to get it back. The lady announced her intention to have a wedding there. Everyone present was in a state of shock, not believing their own eyes. A quiet whisper began between the people. They looked at each other and exchanged quick remarks. It became known that the upcoming wedding was to take place with her new fiancé, and it was clear from Gray's look that he understood the whole situation. The Count instantly flared up and became furious, unable to contain his emotions. The lady reminded that she had warned about the wedding with Sano. In 10 days, they were going to hold the wedding ceremony there. Gray started shouting that he would not take her back after his divorce from her husband. He thought she was acting like that to make him angry. He had no intention of living with a divorced woman, but she hadn't asked him to. Candace and Sano loved each other until the end of their lives. They will never divorce. Gray assumed that the guy had seduced her. That was why she was acting that way. If she was going to hurt him, he wanted it to be with a man of higher birth. Candace quickly turned around and, without thinking, took the glass of wine from the servant's tray. After that, she threw the wine right in his face without hesitation. Everyone present did not expect such an act and was shocked. This gesture was for the fact that he insulted the future owner of the Count's house, although he himself was a self-absorbed bastard. For her, the past relationship was the most terrible insult to her honor. Now she understood why they splashed champagne in the faces of the scoundrels. In 10 days there will be a wedding there. All invitations will be sent to homes. Everyone started congratulating her, because their city hadn't had a luxurious wedding for a long time. Candace asked her husband not to listen to the Count. He was furious with his own insignificance. They had to go. Sano wondered if this was really the end, if Gray would dare to bother them again. The Count thought that the new groom was hiding something and did not believe that Candace could betray him. The night before the wedding, the girl was brought jewelry. She was going to choose the ones she liked. The expensive jewelry would look good on her. She wasn't worried at all, because the wedding wouldn't affect her wonderful life in any way. Although she wasn't worried, Sano could barely contain his emotions. The closer the appointed date got, the faster his heart pounded. Imagining the scene of exchanging marriage vows took his breath away. Lauren suddenly appeared in the room, immediately attracting attention. He curiously asked what the young man was doing and whether he was really guarding the lady. The young man firmly stated that Lauren had better leave as he did not belong here. The treasurer was just passing by, a strange tone. It was true that in the absence of the lady he behaved differently, therefore he was deceiving. Sano understood perfectly well what kind of feelings Lauren had for the Countess. That's why he was so categorical that Lauren stayed away from her. Suddenly, the lady's ringing voice rang out above the argument, piercing the silence like a bell. The lady watched them from the balcony and asked what they were doing there. According to her, Lauren should have been taking care of finances, and Sano should have been taking a rest a long time ago. The treasurer was surprised at how quickly his opponent's emotions changed. The guy looked away in embarrassment and admitted that sleep had not come to him that night. His whole heart was occupied with thoughts of the upcoming wedding. There was something surprisingly sweet and touching in his confession, awakening an involuntary smile in everyone who heard it. During the day, he saw her wedding dress, so he couldn't sleep. Closing his eyes, he imagined her. He repeated the oath 100 times again, and left the ring with Anlin for safekeeping. Everyone said that the wedding would be perfect, but he was worried that he would ruin everything. Candace asked not to be nervous, because she also became restless as soon as she lay down in bed and closed her eyes. The girl also turned to Lauren, reminding him that he should also go to bed, because rest was necessary. In one voice, they quietly and sincerely wished her good night, and in these words there was an almost familial warmth. But as the hallway grew quiet, Candace felt her own heart tighten with worry. She was starting to feel anxious now too, and this feeling was just the beginning of what was to come.